Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Every Ship Needs a Human, written by Catfish21SM. Hello. If you are reading this, it's because you are new to our crew. I want to inform you of a situation that arose a while ago so that hopefully you'll not make the same mistake. It all started on GTS Galactic Timestamp 38967.68. It was a normal day, but I had finally had enough. There is a member of our crew, Smith. Smith's official title is Emergency Engineer, something our captain had come up with. In reality, Smith was a glorified janitor. I say that because he cleaned when he was bored, but even then, the cleaning drones did a much better job. In reality, Smith did nothing useful. He just sat around, loafing all day, every day, basically just doing whatever he wanted. He was on our ship for one reason, and one reason only, because he and the captain were old friends. That would have been okay. Getting onto a crew like ours that did contract work often did come with connections after all. The older members of our crew were okay with it as well. Well, they'd more or less just gotten used to it. On the other hand, I and several of my companions were getting fed up with Smith. He was mooching off of our captain and giving nothing in return. The only time that he ever did anything at all was when he felt like it, because he was bored or something. He would occasionally be found in different rooms just staring at the wall or doing nothing at all, because he was bored. He knew that I was in contempt of him and tried to come up with various excuses, like he was checking if anything was different. What, did the paint fade or something? And before you ask about the engineer title, I looked into his background. No, he never had such training. He went to school to be a pilot and dropped out halfway through that when he became enthralled with a female of his species. It was easy to find out because Smith was an old college roommate of our captain. Now, he was just worthlessly sitting around feeding off our captain's resources and giving nothing in return. I mean, he could at least try to do something. He could at least try to act like he wasn't mooching. That's why I built up my courage and decided to speak to our captain about our resident Smith problem. He just blew me off. I told him how it was that Smith was a moocher who was using him. He came back saying that he was happy, how much I cared for him and his ship. And that's the reason that he hired me, because he knew that I was a good person. But he also said that every ship needs a human, and don't bring this back up again. I could not stand watching Smith leech off the captain's kindness, though. That's why I got together with the rest of the crew and started a petition. The captain owned our ship. He could decide to ignore it. He probably would, judging by his attitude. I just wanted to let him know that I wasn't alone, though. Many of his crew had the same feelings towards Smith. Then it happened. Before I could turn in my petition, I had nearly gathered up all the signatures of those who agreed with me. There were a couple who hadn't signed yet, out of hesitation, but I was going to get their signatures. Well, then again, at this point, I suppose it didn't really matter any longer. We were all dead. It was a normal routine refilling. We stopped off by a gas giant because it had many of the gases needed to keep our warp drive functioning normally. Our actual engineers figured that part out. However, now it was stopped. My screen was flashing red, and we might as well be dead. Our normal sublight engines were working normally, so we could travel around the system all we wanted. But the system wasn't inhabited. This wasn't a popular stop either. By the time another ship stopped to refuel, we'd probably be all long dead. I suppose, at this point, my disputes with Smith didn't matter anymore. I erased the petition off my pad and resolved myself by fate. You might be asking what our actual engineers were doing. Well, they just sighed and walked off to the eating quarters. They could build a warp drive from scratch, but they couldn't diagnose an issue with it. Everyone knew that. Warp drives were extraordinarily complex creations. One small mistake could set it off with an explosion enough to destroy a small planet. You could build a warp drive fine, but once they came online, they powered themselves. There was no shutting it off. There was no troubleshooting, and there was no repairing. It was impossible to restart it without a Dyson sphere nearby. That's why they were so expensive. So we had all resigned ourselves to our fate. Well, all but me, that is. I ran to the captain's quarters and woke him up. I was looking for something, anything, to get us out of the situation. Sure, we could probably rearrange the ship to grow the necessary foodstuffs to survive. We might all die of old age even. But that's not how I wanted to go. On a ship in the middle of nowhere with nothing to do. I suppose I was starting to understand how Smith felt. The captain grumpily just said, "Let Smith handle it," without even giving me a second glance, then went back to sleep. Smith, that's right, he was our emergency engineer, wasn't he? It was time to find out how useful he really was. At this point, I didn't feel like picking on him anymore. We were going to be stuck together for a while, after all, and everyone knows how crazy humans can get. However, I couldn't let this opportunity pass me up. This was an emergency, after all, and I'll admit, some small part of me hoped that he didn't hold that title for nothing, even though all my research determined that he did. I marched myself to the living quarters and knocked on his door. After a while, with no response, I used the emergency protocol to force the door open. There was no one there. I looked in the eating quarters, the medbay, everywhere I could think to look, and he was nowhere to be found. Then, as I rushed towards the engine room, I saw it. The ship's power flicker, and everything went back to normal. Followed by Smith walking out of the engine room covered in oil and gunk of various colors and terrible scents. He was wiping sweat off his brow. As he saw me standing there, he shouted in a calm and undisturbed voice as everything was normal. "Hey there, might want to move out of the way. There's a stinker coming through, and he's got a first-class ticket to the showers. I'm sure you don't want to catch any of my gunk, do you?" I was mesmerized. I slowly moved out of his way as I watched him walk by. After I came to my senses, I ran to the engine room, and there was no one there. It was just Smith. Did he fix it? Was this title not just for show? Then later, in the eating quarters, I heard the captain get onto our other engineers. "Smith says, you guys forgot to replace the biofilters in the warp drive fueling bay. You guys know how dangerous that is. We could all be dead thanks to your mistake. Now listen, I know it was just a simple mistake, and don't worry, he's already replaced them and cleaned it up a bit. But be more careful next time. The lives of everyone on our ship depends on your work. Got that?" "Oh, come on, Cap. Now don't be too hard on them. They just forgot us all," replied Smith in his usual calm demeanor. But the look of horror on the faces of the other engineers told a different story. They weren't afraid of their punishment, just a little bit of docked wages is all, but they were horrified at how bad this could have gone. "Don't worry, guys, the emergency function caught it in time. It was a simple fix. Learn from the mistake and let's move on. We'll do better next time, right?" They all shook their heads to Smith's remark, and he and the captain walked off, leaving them to sulk. I walked over and butted in. "I'm sorry to hear, but what's up with Smith? I don't want to be rude, but he has no engineering background at all right? How is it that he could fix an issue that you guys couldn't even diagnose?" "He's human," they responded, looking at me with curiosity, as if it were common sense that he could do it simply because he's a human. Then the lead engineer, probably picking up on my confusion, spoke out. "No one really understands why, but the humans' brains are just different. They aren't necessarily smarter, but they are able to easily recognize patterns and connect dots that no other species can even fathom. You've heard of humans that are crazy, right? That's usually the case because they see something that we simply cannot. They pick up on it intuitively. A single human is able to single-handedly perform the tasks of several of our best AIs at once. It's just natural to them." I still didn't fully understand, but I understood enough to know that I was wrong. Smith had saved my life, and it was worth having him on board just because he was a human. I later confronted the captain after we'd finished unloading all of our cargo. I apologized for my previous outbursts about Smith, and his response was simple. "I saw you speaking with the other engineers earlier. I suppose they told you about humans. Honestly, I thought everyone knew. I thought you were just letting out some steam. Sorry. Should have explained it better. Listen, Smith is the hardest working man on my crew. It might not look that way, but he knows my ship better than anyone else. Here, look at this." He handed me a tablet with a list of small ship parts. most of them common stock items, light fixtures, wall platings, mostly small parts. There were a few others in there as well, biofilters for the warp drive, coagulants for the sublight drive, and a name I didn't recognize. It had a price mark next to it. The piece was probably worth more than me by itself. "Ah, so you noticed. I'm buying 2 of these today." I looked at him in surprise. "Yeah, I get it, but you see, Smith says we need one. I just want to be safe, though, so I'm buying an extra. You see, if Smith says I need something, I buy it, no questions asked. Heck, if he told me to buy a new ship, I would. I'd send this one to the junkyard, even if it looked like nothing was wrong with it. Sure, it would cost me a fortune, my entire life savings, and I'd be selling a perfectly good ship for scrap. But that's just how much I trust Smith. All my engineers are the same. He saved our butts more times than I could ever count. My old mentor, the man I co-captained for once, told me that every ship needs a human. I listened to him at first and hired Smith on because I knew him well, and I knew that he was a good and honest man. However, he couldn't do hardly anything right. I got into a similar mindset to the one that you have, and I was ready to let him go when a pipe burst. He fixed it up with some duct tape that he'd brought with him, and he made it back to the port safely. He then gave me a list of parts that we needed. At first, I thought it was just dumb luck that he'd fixed it, and he was just trying to look important. But after some more thorough scans of the ship, my engineers agreed on all fronts with him. They'd never even noticed until I asked them to look. Only one part on the list, this one right here, that they say was working fine and didn't need replace. I was convinced. The price at the time was my entire life saving, and they weren't known for going bad either. The chances were that Smith was wrong. I wanted him to be, but I went out on a limb and bought it anyway. Can you guess the next part that went bad and left us stranded? The fact of the matter is, Smith knows my ship better than I could ever hope to, better than my best engineers. He might not have some fancy degree, and his methods of resolving life-threatening issues can sometimes be fairly, rough around the edges, yeah. But I listen to every word he says because without him, me and my crew would be dead several times over. So sure, I'd buy a whole ship at the mere suggestion of it from Smith. I'd empty my entire life savings at a mere nudge from the guy. You know why? It's because every part of my ship, even the ship itself, can be replaced. But the lives of me and my crew are irreplaceable. No amount of money in the world can bring someone back from the dead. You want to know the funniest thing? It was actually Smith that taught me that as well. By the way, it seems you haven't noticed, but my ship is more than 200 human years old. However, it still runs like new, because Smith is constantly keeping it tip-top shape. The man has saved me enough credits to buy 3 of these things over. You know, I think I'll make you a fine captain someday, and if you ever go that route, always remember what happened today. Remember, no matter what anyone says to you, even if your entire crew hates you, even if they get together and sign a petition, even if they think you're crazy, even if they threaten to quit, remember that every ship needs a human. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Transoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, Ambrose Catal, Lord Ashrakal, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.